Good afternoon. My name is Ross Hudson and I'm the Social Work Director for Area 2, and I'm here to talk to you about the stages of adolescent development. It really does take a special person working with a teenager, and after 25 years of doing that, I really realize how crazy I am to choose to work with that population. But hopefully I can give you some insight into how to have a better relationship with that teenager and get really from the teenager the information you need in order to help them. First of all, we want to look at youth development and their self-esteem. And most teenagers have issues around self-esteem, and so you need to know how to work with them on how to build that self-esteem. Building self-esteem requires teaching teens skills that they can feel good about. Usually I ask them, well, what kind of things do you like to do? What do you do well? What have you been told that you do well? Sometimes it's, you find out that they mow grass well, or they cook well, or they take care of small kids, and they enjoy doing that, and so I look at that. Then you want to, adolescents that connected to and valued by family and schools and community are more likely to postpone sexual activity and delay pregnancy. Teens need opportunities for meaningful youth development, and so we really want to know the resources in the community, places where they can do volunteer work, and it's really good to get with your church leaders, your community leaders, and say, hey, I've got a bunch of teenagers, they need some projects, and help me find some projects that they can do. And so usually you can find that in your local community. The first stage of development is, there's 3 different stages, and there's the early adolescents, the 9 to 13-year-olds. I call that the devil group. And then there's the middle adolescents, the 14 to 16-year-olds, and then the late adolescents, the 16+ years old. And the first stage of development, the early teens, the 9 to 13-year-olds, what you usually find is that there's significant physical changes. They're maturing in their sexual department. There's concrete thinking. They really can't project into the future. They see everything as black or white, so that can be a real issue. Either you're all right or you're all wrong. There's no gray area. There's an increasing influence of peers, and this is where you see them begin to pull away from their parents. If they've been involved in church activities, they pull away from those. And you see them beginning to want to dress like and look like other teenagers their age. There's the transition to middle school, where there's more independence in the schedule, and they have to take some responsibility for their learning. It's not just going to school 6 hours a day and coming home and doing their homework. They really have to get out and develop projects, maybe doing some stuff in the community, so they really take more responsibility there. In the early teens, the social and emotional characteristics are, they really pull from the values learned from their parents, and they begin to test those by working with their peers. They begin to experimentation with identity, who they are, and you see this played out in their dress. They may have always wore the clothes that mom bought them, but they come back and they want to look a certain way, or they want to wear a certain pair of tennis shoes or a certain brand. So they really begin to experiment with who they are and want their look. There's more freedom. There's less ongoing supervision. You find that teenagers are left alone. Parents feel more comfortable leaving them alone, and hopefully they use good judgment while they're alone. And then there's the transition to middle school, requires more responsibility and independence. A lot, especially in the rural areas, they may have to catch the school bus. They may have to come up and plan as they take exams. They may have to come up with their own transportation, talk to their friends or their friends' parents, and those kinds of things. So you see them taking more responsibility for their learning. In the middle adolescents, the 14 to 16-year-olds, there's a great change in their physical characteristics. There's continuing sex changes. There's an intense focus on body image, and this is where you really get into, sometimes they begin to want a tattoo, they want their tongue pierced. I worked with one teenage boy, and for his 15th birthday, he wanted his tongue pierced, and so his parents thought that was very normal, fine. They were all right with them until I told them some of the reasons the teenagers wanted their tongues pierced, and so they then had a different opinion. But anyway, they really began to look at their body image, how they look at themselves, how much they weigh, how they dress, how they wear their hair. It's really important. There's a beginning capacity for abstract thinking. They begin to think outside the box. It's not just all black or white. When you talk about issues like murder or abortion or civil rights, they begin to look at the bigger picture and begin to see gray areas there as people make decisions. So you can begin to see that. There's enormous influence of peers. This is where they really want to pull away from mom and dad. They don't want to look the way mom and dad look. They don't want to go, if they've been involved in church, they don't want to go to church. They may want to be in a different political party. If parents are Auburn fans, they may want to be Alabama fans. So you see them pulling away from their parents. They want to spend less time with their parents. They want their parents to, if their parents take them to school, they want to be dropped off down the street. They don't want mom or dad to pull up in front of the school. Even if they may have a nice car, they don't want to be seen with their parents. So they pull back away from their parents, and it's very normal. And it's very hard for parents sometimes. They think their teenagers are doing something wrong, and really what it is the teenagers just maturing. They want to have their own independence and grow into their own person. And you see them taking risk. They begin to, they may experiment in some behaviors. They may, try some different things. They may... Everybody in the school may think one way, and they may decide that they think something else is cool, so they'll try that. So you see them taking some risks there. They may speak up on some social issues, those kinds of things. Some social and emotional changes that you see are, of course, extreme, looking at messages of culture regarding body size and grooming. There's this risk for eating disorders and body image disorders. They really do think that people look that way in the magazine. They have all these teen magazines, and they go and look at the guys and the girls in those pictures, and they think that they have to have the perfect teeth or the perfect breast or the perfect abs or all those kinds of things. And so, they get a real distorted picture of that. Parental beliefs are most likely to become secondary in this age group, and the peer group comes first. Research shows groups have more influence than parents or their best friends, but parents can moderate the peers' influence. Parents need to stand strong. I always encourage parents to stay being a parent at least till they get 18, and after 18 you can decide whether you want to be a friend to your teenager or not, but really until they get 18 you need to be a parent. And so parents really need to go ahead and say how they feel. They need to go ahead and be parents, even though the teenager will rebel. And I always ask you to go back and think about your teenage years and what you did and what you got by with. And so just keep that in mind when you're working with a teenager. Another thing is if they're connected to their school, they can, it can really, if they tie into their school and they feel a part of their school, then there's less likely for, evidence of them getting into trouble. If they are perceived to get along with the teachers and with other students, then that keeps them out of trouble. And you see a great influence there of how they feel like they take ownership of the school, they take ownership of clubs and activities, and they really feel proud of their work. And so they can go back to, building the self-esteem, really looking at some things that they accomplished. They may be working on the school newspaper or being on the football team or in the band. Those kinds of things can be really important to teenagers, so you really want to explore that. And then in the next age group, you have the late adolescents, and these are the 16-year-olds and older. And then this is where you see the physical and sexual changes are complete or almost complete. There's the capacity for abstract thought in place, and this is where they really can see outside the box. They can see the other person's viewpoint. They may not agree with that viewpoint, but they can understand it. You see a lot of really good debaters in high school, and this is where they can really think outside the box and see someone else's viewpoint and address that. There's some adult cognitive functioning. They can really look at the big picture and not just the small, getting tasks done. They can really look at, people don't go to work just because they want to go to work. They go to work to get their bills paid and to have, maybe a social life, other kinds of influences they get at work. The family influence, the beginning to be in balance with the peer influences. This is where you see them coming back to some of their roots, some of their basic beliefs. If they've had some Christian training or religious training, they may come back to that, where before in earlier teenage years they may have resisted that, or lifestyle issues. You may see them come and change at this age. And you see a transition to work in college, into independent living, and this can be very frightening to a teenager. For 16, 17 years, they've had mom and dad tell them what to do, or a grandparent or an older sibling tell them what to do, and suddenly they're living by themselves. They have their own apartment. They don't have to go to work. And so when they come into the health department and are talking about issues, you may have to weave back in, well, what are the consequences if you don't go to work? You don't get the check, you may lose your job, you may lose your insurance, those kinds of things. And you value your independence and you don't want to go back and live with your mom and dad, so you may have to choose to go to work, not because you want to go to work, but because you have to pay your bills. So you want to weave all that stuff in there together as you're talking to them, but realize it's really difficult, can be very frightening to a teenager. And if you look on the outside, you may see this mask there. They may have a hard look, real jaded appearance, but really they can be very frightened of what the future holds for them, and they can feel very hopeless, and there may even be some issues about depression that you can pick up on, but don't be surprised when you're dealing with this age group. That was just a general overview of all the stages of adolescent development. Hopefully it will be helpful to you as you assess your teens. If you have any questions, please get with your area social work director. If not, you can give Ross Hudson a call in Area 2. Thank you very much.